They called it the Siege of Halveris IV, though by the time the story truly begins, Halveris didn't look like a planet being sieged. It looked like a graveyard wrapped in storm clouds. The atmosphere was thin and burnt by plasma fire. The land cracked and cratered from years of artillery. The sky glowed with a faint crimson halo, as though the world itself carried an open wound. Chaplain Marcus Ward stepped over a ridge of shattered ferrocrete, boots sinking into soot-fine dust, and listened to the silence between distant explosions. Even silence had a sound on Halveris IV, like the world was waiting for something. He carried no rifle, only a cross made from spent bullet casings hanging around his neck, a personal communicator built into his throat mic, and the weight of hundreds of dying men's words stored in his memory. Marcus wasn't old by priest standards, maybe in his mid-30s, but war had aged him. Gray streaked through dark hair, and deep lines lived around his eyes. He had seen too many last breaths, too many hands trembling in his, too many final words whispered into the static of ruined air. And yet, he still believed in something, not naive belief, not blind hope, something deeper. Like the universe had a center and organizing force, a quiet order. A voice hissed through his tactical earpiece. "Chaplain, we're moving positions. Trenches Alpha through Gamma are nearly gone. Report to Command Post Theta." He pressed a hand to the earpiece. "On my way." He began walking. As he moved through the human defensive zone, soldiers looked up, some nodding, some exhausted beyond gestures. They weren't churchgoers, most of them. Some didn't even believe in anything beyond the next heartbeat. But they believed in Marcus Ward. They believed in his presence. He had once joked with the squad in the bunker, "I'm not here to keep you alive. I'm here so if you die, you don't die alone." And the men had looked away, swallowing hard. Because that kind of honesty cut deeper than shrapnel. Marcus stepped into Command Post Theta, a half-buried armored shelter where holographic maps flickered on walls of scorched metal. Major Harlan stood hunched over a display, the hologram bathing his face in cold light. The man looked like someone carved from iron filings. "Chaplain," Harlan said, "we've intercepted something strange." Marcus raised a brow. "Strange how?" Harlan tapped a control. A recording played a crackling audio file. At first, Marcus heard nothing unusual. Just the voice of a man, Sergeant Declan Liu, reciting an old Earth prayer. "Grant us the strength to face the storm, though we walk through fire and shadow." Then another voice joined in, Corporal Raymond. Then another, Lieutenant Avery. A dozen voices. Then hundreds. Harlan looked up. This choir of prayer began spreading across units. Not ordered, not coordinated. Marcus listened with a slow inhale. On the audio, the prayer grew in rhythm, cadence, flow. And beneath its surface, Marcus heard something invisible, a hidden pattern. The major turned off the playback. "You realize what we discovered?" Marcus shook his head slightly. "These prayers spoken aloud on unsecured channels are forming an encrypted command language. They're embedded with tactical sequences, fire coordinates, maneuver signals, unit directives." Marcus felt a chill. "You're saying these aren't just prayers? They're code, Chaplain. A way of communicating in plain sight." Marcus stared at the metal wall, as though he might see right through it. "It wasn't design," Harlan went on. "It emerged. Like the soldiers unconsciously shaped a shared language through invocation." Marcus said quietly, "Like a soul-developing syntax." Harlan stared at him. "Call it whatever you want. But the enemy, those scaled bastards, they intercepted it. They started broadcasting it across their entire army as a joke. They think they're mocking human faith." Marcus took a slow breath. "And what does that mean for us?" Harlan gestured sharply to the door. "That's why I need you. When you speak, people follow. If you can amplify this, if you can shape this prayer language, then every whispered verse becomes a battlefield command. Marcus felt the weight of it. A priest becoming a weapon. He answered quietly. I'll go to the soldiers. Outside again. He walked trench lines filled with exhausted men. Plasma rounds streaked overhead like falling stars. The smell of ozone and burned metal clung to everything. He passed young troopers clutching rifles too tightly, eyes too wide. Some murmured under their breath, not words, just vibrations of fear. Others stared blankly. The war had lasted so long that no one remembered when they weren't tired. Marcus stopped in the center of a dugout, where dozens of soldiers waited in the dark. They turned toward him instinctively. Some leaned forward. Some straightened. Some simply listened with their breathing. Marcus spoke not loudly, but with a calm that seemed to widen the space around him. Men, he said, I know today feels like the end of something. Maybe the end of everything. But I want you to understand something. Your voices, your prayers, they are being heard. Someone laughed stiffly. By God? Marcus looked at him gently. By everyone. He let silence fall a moment. When you pray, you're not bowing. You're rising. You're saying to this universe, I am still here. I am still standing. I am not done. A soldier exhaled shakil. Marcus stepped closer. So speak, he said. Not in whisper, but in will. Don't pray for safety. Don't pray for escape. Pray for strength. Strength to fight smart. Strength to protect each other. Strength to endure long enough to win. Then he lowered his voice, almost conspiratorial. And while you speak, remember your training, your timing, your signals. Hide them inside the rhythm. Use faith as cover. They think they're listening to surrender. Let them hear strategy instead. A murmur went through the troops. One soldier, a young comms operator, said uncertainly, Sir, do you think God listens? Marcus glanced at the red-lit sky, where artillery flares floated like wounded stars. I don't know how God listens, he said. Only that we keep surviving when we should not. That every time death closes its fist, somehow we slip through the fingers. Maybe that's coincidence, or maybe something wants us to live. The soldiers didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They simply breathed differently. Steadier. Stronger. One by one, they began to pray. Grant us courage to stand before fear. Let our eyes see through smoke and shadow. Guide our aim. Steady our hands. The words drifted upward, unaware that alien receivers captured every syllable. Unaware that the enemy listening began to feel unease, because these prayers sounded less like hope and more like a storm gathering. Something shifted in Marcus's inner tightening. This was no longer just surviving. This was becoming something else. And somewhere beyond human sight. In the cold strategy chambers of the alien armada, commanders paused and asked for the first time, what are they saying? Marcus walked on, deeper into the trenches, deeper into the night. Deeper into the current of human voices rising, and above Halveris IV, where stars burned through the thinning atmosphere. Something old and unseen felt the resonance of human defiance, like a heartbeat echoing through creation. Somewhere in the dark, the humans began to pray. The alien relay station hovered above Halveris IV, like a fractured crescent of obsidian metal, broken in places but still operational. Inside its dark chambers, the Zir sovereign caste listened to captured human transmissions with cold amusement. Their auditory physiology differed from humans. They detected emotional signatures in sound. Anger carried one flavor, fear another, hope another. But this transmission from human channels, it confused them. They heard sorrow and grit, woven with calculation. One of the Zir linguists, a tall, silver-scaled specialist named Vexil, re-examined the playback. His forked tongue tapped against sensory palates as he processed the auditory matrix. His translated remark came out sharp. These sounds, they mimic supplication. But underlying pulses, these are not emotional randomness. Another alien clicked its mandibles. Faith babble. Primitive self-soothing. Humans fear extinction. Vexel narrowed his eyes. If the race had eyebrows, he would have frowned. No, listen closely. He slowed the recording. Now voices weren't just reverence and rhythm. They were counting. Timing. Signaling. Two. Words repeated across multiple units. Deliver us. To a human, it meant a plea, but buried in cadence. Deliver carried coordinate reference. Us contained encoded confirmation. There was pattern where faith met mathematics. Vexel hissed slowly. I suspect these prayers are instructions. The others stared. They are commanding an army, Vexel continued, through religious incantation. They pray as they kill. Silence followed, the kind that only intelligent fear can create. Meanwhile, on the ground, Marcus Ward knelt behind a shattered parapet with Field Captain Torin. Torin was young for rank, but war had forced acceleration of leadership. His voice was dry, practical. Chaplain, enemy intercept activity has spiked. They're spreading our prayers across their entire force network. Marcus gave a quiet half-smile. Mocking us. Maybe, Torin said. But the more they broadcast us, the more our units pick up the prayer rhythm faster. It's like they're accidentally training us. Marcus let the wind scrape grit against his cheek. He watched humans moving through trenches, silent gestures, hushed prayer commands, and felt something swelling inside the collective psyche. A people that looked broken, yet was crystallizing into something sharp. He turned to Torin. When I was a child, a priest told me something I never forgot. Torin raised a brow. He said, humans don't pray for help. They pray for courage. A plasma blast lit the horizon, throwing red haze across both their faces. Torin swallowed. Do you believe that? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He shifted, leaning back against the parapet. His breath came slow. His thoughts quieter. I believe humans want to face fate upright. Not on their knees. He paused, then added softly, even when they kneel. They fell into quiet. Behind them, soldiers continued speaking prayer commands. Some used traditional phrases, others improvised new ones. All in rhythm. Until our breath is taken, let our aim be steady. We rise from ruin, shaped in resolve. Grant that each shot finds its purpose. But this wasn't desperate begging. This was sharpening a blade. Far away, across the trench valley, the Zaire forward unit watched human formations through magnification optics. They saw something unfamiliar, humans moving with synchronized precision, as though guided by one shared mind. Without visible signals, an alien trooper turned to Vexel's relay feed. Their movements defy logic. No signal flags. No light code. No neural link tech. Another paused. They are. Speaking coordination? Confusion edges toward unease. Meanwhile, Marcus continued walking along trench lines, greeting soldiers by name, meeting their eyes not as a priest bestowing blessing, but as a man absorbing the burden of their fear and offering something back. At one point, he stopped beside Private Orrin Hask, who sat trembling, gripping a rifle with knuckles white. Marcus lowered himself beside the soldier, quietly matching the man's posture. You're scared, Marcus said gently. Hask didn't deny it. I keep thinking, there's no way we walk out of this. Marcus nodded. That's honesty. And it's okay. Hask's eyes glistened faintly. Marcus continued, voice soft like steadying breath. But look at you, still here. Still holding the line. Your body is afraid, but your will hasn't broken. That's courage. Not absence of fear, but mastery of it. Hask exhaled, a trembling sigh that shook out some tension. And when you pray, Marcus added, you are not asking some invisible being to save you. You're reminding yourself, I can endure this moment. And the next. And the next. Hask nodded slowly, the trembling easing. The human spirit, fragile, but unyielding. Then Marcus rose and walked onward. Dust whispering under his boots. Overhead, the channels began to hum with growing unity. What began as scattered prayer had become chorus. Like 1,000 hearts beating in rhythm. This was when Marcus felt something shift within him. Something heavy. He knew what he had to say next. He activated his throat mic and spoke with quiet, steady resonance, his voice traveling through all human units. Listen to me. The prayer voices paused. He continued. They hear us now. Every word, every syllable. They mock our faith. They cannot comprehend that prayer is not submission. Silence full of breath and heartbeat. It is declaration. The channels remained hushed, soldiers hanging onto each word. When you speak, remember, you are not asking for rescue. You are stating that you will not break. A rumble of emotion passed through the ranks. Your prayer is not weakness. It is willpower that refuses to die. He let that settle. Then, like a conductor raising his hand, he gave the simplest instruction. Begin. The filled again with prayer, louder, more certain, more steady, unaware that listening aliens were beginning to feel a sensation they had never known. Doubt. At that moment, perhaps only coincidence, perhaps not, the artillery coordinates hidden in the prayer rhythm aligned perfectly with underground seismic mapping. Human artillery batteries fired, not randomly, not desperately. Precisely. Every shell landed exactly where alien armor clustered. The screams of wounded Zaire filled the relay channels. Alien commanders scrambled. Where is their targeting feed? How are they striking through interference? In the midst of chaos, Vexel whispered a revelation. They are doing it with faith. Back on the surface, Marcus reached the ridge and looked across the battlefield, flames licking from shattered alien machines. He didn't smile. He only bowed his head slightly. Not to a deity, but to fallen humans, whose courage paved the path. Moments like this made him feel that somewhere in the architecture of existence, a quiet intelligence watched. Not directing, not intervening. Just present, letting free beings choose, letting courage matter. The prayers climbed higher. Alien fear grew deeper. And through the rising wind, Marcus Ward could feel it. This war was changing form. Humans were not just enduring, they were transforming their pain into something unstoppable. They were speaking thunder into being. And somewhere in the alien command chain, someone finally asked the most important question. What if the humans are not praying to something, but becoming something? The night deepened, though on Halveris IV night was just a darker shade of red. Plasma fire glimmered in drifting smoke like dying embers caught in slow motion. Marcus Ward stood on the forward ridge while waves of prayer commands pulsed across human lines like heartbeat signals. He looked out over the barren valley where alien forces regrouped with jerking urgency. The Zaire had never truly feared humans before. They saw us as volatile primates playing with borrowed technology. But tonight, the aliens stared into the dark and heard something they could not quantify: human determination, amplified into song. Marcus began walking again, descending a slope of loose stone and ash until he reached forward unit Sigma. The soldiers there were in near silence, eyes closed, heads bowed, listening to the shared prayer stream. The prayer language had become layered, almost musical, but beneath the tonal reverence there hid tactical sequencing. To an outsider, the voices seemed solemn. To the initiated, every inflection was intent. Marcus stopped among them and listened. Let us stand unshaken, though the fires come. Grant wisdom in chaos and sight through smoke. Let our hands move where they must. And yet, there was a new note emerging in the prayer. Something Marcus hadn't anticipated. Anger. Not chaotic anger. Not blind fury, but righteous, directed. Sharpened anger. The kind born from injustice. Marcus felt it rising among the men, like heat off desert stone. It wasn't hateful. It wasn't revenge-driven. It was focused like a blade. Humans had prayed for endurance long enough. Now they prayed for the strength to fight back. He caught the gaze of Sergeant Declan Liu, the man whose voice had been on the first intercepted prayer recording. Declan approached him slowly. "Chaplain," he said, voice raw with emotion, "do you ever wonder what happens if God isn't listening?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He noticed Declan's left hand trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from holding too much strength. "I used to," Marcus finally said. "For a long time." Declan waited. Marcus continued, "But eventually, I realized something. Maybe prayer isn't a message going up. Maybe it's a message going inward. Maybe when humans pray, we're not calling to the heavens. We're calling to the part of ourselves that refuses to give up." Declan exhaled slowly, absorbing it. "So it's not asking the God to save us," he said softly. "It's asking ourselves to rise up." Marcus nodded once. Declan's voice regained steel. "Then let them hear us rise." He stepped forward, raised his voice, not shouting, but speaking with solemn clarity. "We do not beg for deliverance." The line spread through Cums like wildfire, passed voice to voice, soldier to soldier. "We become it." A stillness fell. Because that line, those 5 words changed. Something. Marcus felt it. Alien sensors picked it up. XYR translators hit semantic wall. Even Vexel paused in analysis. "We do not beg for deliverance. We become it." This was no longer a plea. This was identity. Suddenly, alien artillery roared, blazing arcs of ion fire streaking toward human trenches. The impact shook the ground, throwing dirt and metal. Shrapnel flew. Men ducked for cover. Marcus dragged a wounded soldier behind a barricade, heart pounding. Dust filled his lungs, ears ringing. Somewhere deeper in the communication grid, he heard Declan's voice still speaking through the chaos. "Let our courage be seen in darkness." Marcus pressed a field dressing into the wounded soldier's shoulder, using both hands to slow bleeding. He felt the man trembling, not fear, adrenaline. "You're going to live," Marcus said, quiet, steady. The wounded soldier looked up at him and whispered, "Not luck. Someone wanted me to live." Marcus blinked. The phrase struck something deep. Not luck, some order, some intention woven into survival. Some intelligence, quiet, unseen. He didn't reply. He just squeezed the soldier's hand firmly. Then the night changed, because the next wave of human artillery fired, not at known alien positions, but at predicted movements. The prayer language, refined through rhythm, had begun. Anticipating enemy strategy. Humans weren't reacting. They were forecasting. Aliens panicked. Their formations faltered. Their channels erupted. Human artillery is pre-anticipating target zones. That is impossible. No predictive AI can function through interference. No machine could do this. Vexel hissed in realization. No machine, he agreed. Only instinct. He stared at the audio streams. At human prayer patterns. At rising frequency signatures. It is as though they tap into something beneath consciousness. Something collective. Alien shock turned to something unfamiliar. Respect. Meanwhile, Marcus reached the highest point of the ridge and surveyed the devastation. A dry wind tugged at his coat. His eyes burned, but not from smoke alone. He saw human figures moving in organized patterns that no enemy could translate. Felt their unity like a current under the ground. He heard their voices like thunder. Held in the throat of the world. He closed his eyes. And for just a moment, he felt a vast quiet presence. Not personal, not anthropomorphic. Not whispering. Just there. As though the universe itself leaned in to witness humanity's defiance. Marcus opened his eyes again and spoke one line through the "Come" A line that moved like a wave. A line that made even the aliens fall silent. We will not be extinguished. And for the first time since the war began, the Zaire wondered if they were facing not simply another species, but a destiny. Because tonight, humans were no longer just surviving. They were becoming something terrifyingly hopeful, something the universe had not seen before, something that would rewrite the meaning of prayer. The Zaire High Command held an emergency council aboard their flagship, a colossal living vessel whose walls pulsed faintly like dark veins. Inside its central chamber, a dozen sovereign cast members gathered in a circle around holographic projections of human patterns. The air shimmered with bioelectric tension. Their leader overlord, Shirksan, watched the hologram with a cold, predatory focus. His voice was a low rasp vibrating through his plated throat. "Explain to me how praise speaks with one voice." Vexel stepped forward. His silver scales dimmed in thought, antennae flattening. They have no telepathic network, no hive mind, and yet their battlefield coordination exceeds ours. Another commander hissed skeptically. "Because they chant? Childish superstition." Vexel glared at him. "Not chant, code. Their faith is a lattice. Their emotion contains structure. Their language, when spoken collectively, forms computational intelligence. They built a system out of belief." For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Shirksan uttered, "You are suggesting their god is mathematics?" "No," Vexel replied quietly. "Their god is will." The council stirred uneasily. "Humans," he continued, "were never superior because of technology, or anatomy, or endurance. They possess something else." He struggled for the correct translation. "They believe in meaning itself, even when logic says meaning is an illusion." The aliens didn't comprehend faith, but they knew the power of unbreakable conviction. And now they saw it manifesting in warfare. Shirksan's eyes narrowed. "Very well. If their prayer is weapon, then we silence it." On the surface, Marcus Ward moved with increasing urgency. He could feel a building pressure, the sense that something unseen was coming. He reached Command Post Theta, where Major Harlan was analyzing fresh telemetry. Harlan looked up. "Chaplain, the enemy just cut power to the orbital spectrum. They're trying to disrupt audio transmission." Marcus frowned. "Will it work?" The Major shook his head slowly. "They don't understand. It doesn't depend on comms anymore. The soldiers are sinking subconsciously. We've crossed a threshold." As if to prove it, even with comms flickering, soldiers across the valley spoke the next prayer line in near-perfect unison. "If silence comes, let our hearts carry the signal." Marcus exhaled, both humbled and awed. It was as though the prayer had evolved beyond words, into instinct. Humans were feeling commands through shared emotional resonance. Declan Liu approached, wiping dust from his face. "They're scared," he said simply. Marcus nodded. "So are we." Declan gave a half-smile. "But fear's honest. It tells us we're alive." Before Marcus could reply, an explosion rocked the earth. Alien ground assault units surged forward, massive armored beasts with quad-spiked limbs and coil guns mounted on their shoulders. Plasma arcs carved trenches into scorched soil. Human soldiers dived for cover, but their retreat was orchestrated, flowing like choreographed movement. They didn't shout. They didn't scramble. They just moved. Marcus watched in real time as the prayer-encoded coordination kicked in. Step back twofold in the face of fire. Troops fell back exactly 2 trenches. Draw them into the bowl. Alien machines advanced into crossfire position. And strike upon the crescent. Artillery and shoulder launchers opened from flanking formations, hitting exposed armor joints. Alien machines collapsed in sparks and torn metal. Major Harlan stared at the battlefield with stunned Realization, my God. This is beyond coordination. This is symphony. Marcus glanced at him. Humans have always turned suffering into art. Why should war be different? More alien units advanced, infantry this time. The Zaire soldiers carried carbon-thin cutting blades and neural disruptors. Their feet made a sickening wet crunch in ash-soaked ground. One of them charged Marcus directly. Marcus didn't flinch. He expected death, but Declan Liu moved faster, tackling the alien. Driving a combat knife into the thin joint below its chin-plate dot as the alien writhed. Declan whispered through clenched teeth, "Forgive me. I choose us." The alien collapsed. Marcus placed a hand on Declan's shoulder, not as priest, but as brother in war. "I saw no sin in that," he said quietly. Declan nodded once, swallowed, and turned back to the fight. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship, Vexel stared at the failing battle telemetry. "This is no longer war," he spoke quietly. "This is declaration of existence." Shirkzan snarled. "Then existence can be crushed." He pointed at Talon. "Deploy resonance breaker. If humans unify through voice and will let us shatter both." Vexel froze. "Overlord." "The resonance breaker disrupts cognitive frequency. It causes brain burn. It will torture them." Shirkzan's reply was icy. "They will die without knowing whether it was their god. Or I, who silenced them." Vexel hesitated long enough that someone else hissed, "Are you empathizing with humans?" The accusation hung venomously. Vexel answered carefully, "I am. Studying them." He turned away, but inside him, a strange stirring began on the planet. A strange hum rose through the air, subsonic, like the vibration of a planet groaning. Marcus felt it first, a buzzing in his skull, like static behind his thoughts. He knelt, gritting his teeth. Nearby, Harlan clutched his head. Soldiers staggered. One screamed. Another vomited. The prayer stream faltered for a moment. Marcus pressed his palm to the ground. His breath shook. And then a voice spoke inside him. Not external, not foreign, just his own voice. But stronger. "We do not speak with our mouths." Pain surged, then steadied. "We speak with our purpose." Human soldiers looked up, eyes wide, and one by one they understood. Prayer didn't need sound. Didn't need channel. Didn't need audible words. It was will. It was conviction. Like thousands of human souls pushing upward at once. The hum persisted. But the soldiers stood. Declan Liu's voice cracked but held. "Our enemy believes silence is defeat." Marcus stood, slowly, trembling, but upright. "They mistake quiet for surrender." And then Marcus, with staggering force of spirit, spoke aloud. "We carry prayer in marrow. You cannot silence a species that has learned to speak with the heart." Then the strangest thing happened. The resonance breaker, built to disrupt thought, began feeding back, because instead of breaking human unity, it amplified it. The aliens unintentionally synchronized the humans into a perfect harmonic. Human will turned into frequency. Frequency turned into pressure. Pressure turned into force. Alien. Machines began shuddering. Sensors overwhelmed. Neural nets overloaded. In the flagship, warnings screamed. Resonance overload, system feedback breaching. Vexel stared in awe. "They are not praying for strength anymore." He trembled. "They are strength." Humans, battered but unbroken, stood in formation, silent now, not because they were stopped, but because they had risen beyond the need for speech. Marcus looked across the battlefield, seeing humans standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes burning, wills aligned. They looked UNDEFEATA BLE. And above them, in the silence after suffering, there was a sense, as though something vast in the universe simply nodded. This was the night the aliens realized Humans do not kneel to power, that they become power, and the war had just shifted. Under a quiet desert sky, the young man who had now learned much from earlier travels stood near the old well that had once saved the thirsty traveler. The moonlight gently illuminated the sand as he waited, sensing that something significant was about to happen. From the distance, he saw a figure approaching slowly. It was an elderly man with a walking stick, his beard white, his eyes calm and kind. When he finally reached the young man, he spoke. "Tell me," the old man said softly, "what have you learned from your journey so far?" The young man answered without hesitation, "I learned that wealth does not make one rich. Kindness does. I learned that patience is stronger than anger. And I learned that one small act of goodness can echo endlessly." The old man smiled. "Then you have already taken steps toward wisdom." He then pointed toward the horizon where darkness met the sand. "Your next lesson," the old man said, "is to face falsehood with truth, even when it is difficult. Even when you stand alone." The young man felt a slight tremble in his chest, not of fear, but of the enormous responsibility of truth. "How will I find this truth?" he asked. The old man replied, "Truth is not found, it is upheld. When you speak, speak honestly. When you witness injustice, do not remain silent. And when you are tested, let your heart be firm in sincerity." With these words, the old man lifted his hand as if offering a blessing. The wind gently passed between them. When the young man blinked, the old man was gone, but something new had appeared beside the well. A small leather-bound book, old and worn, its pages filled with wisdom from travelers of many generations. The young man opened it. Inside, the first page was written, "If you walk with truth, Allah walks with you." The young man closed the book respectfully, held it to his chest, and began walking forward into the unknown. But not into uncertainty. He now understood. The journey was not only across land, but also within the heart. The next morning, the young man awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The soft light of dawn stretched across the dunes, and with it came the feeling that the world itself was inviting him onward. He opened the leather-bound book again. This time he noticed a second line beneath the first, written so faintly it was almost missed. "Truth without humility becomes pride. Humility without truth becomes silence." He pondered it deeply. As he walked further through the desert path, he eventually reached a small settlement. There he found a tense scene. A crowd had gathered around a merchant who was angrily accusing a poor traveler of stealing a pouch of coins. The merchant shouted, "Search his bag! He is a thief!" The traveler only lowered his head. "I did not take anything," he said quietly. The people murmured, unsure of what to believe. The young man felt the weight of the old man's words. "When you witness injustice, do not remain silent." So he stepped forward. "Have the bag opened," he said calmly. "Let us see the truth openly." The merchant hesitated, but then agreed. The bag was opened. Inside was nothing but a few dates, a small prayer rug, and a worn-out drinking cup. No coins. A silence fell. Then the young man turned to the merchant and asked gently, "Do you still believe him guilty?" The merchant's face flushed, not from embarrassment alone, but from shame. He lowered his eyes. "I was mistaken." The traveler raised his head slightly and said, "I forgive you." Those words, simple but powerful, washed over the crowd. The young man realized something profound. Truth had defended the innocent, but forgiveness had healed the moment. Later, as he sat alone beneath the shade of a palm tree, he reflected on the event. Truth had demanded courage. Forgiveness had required humility, and together, they formed wisdom. The young man continued his journey, leaving the settlement behind. As the sun dipped low in the sky, he reached a quiet valley where scattered stones created a natural path. The air was cooler here, almost soothing. He found a spot to rest and opened the old leather book again. This time there was a handwritten note, Tucked between the pages, different handwriting. Softer, more elegant. Wisdom grows in silence. Listen more than you speak. He sat quietly, letting the silence of nature wrap around him. After some time, he heard footsteps. A man approached, strong shoulders, stern face, eyes sharp with pride. "You," the man said, "I have heard that you walked into disputes and spoke truth boldly. Tell me, do you believe you are wiser than others?" The question was a test, but not of knowledge, of ego. The young man answered gently, "No, I do not consider myself wiser. I only ask Allah to guide my heart." The stern man frowned. "If you are not wise, then why do people listen to you?" The young man closed the book and replied, "They listen not to me, but to truth. And truth belongs to no man." The stern man stared for a long moment. Then his expression softened. The hardness in his face seemed to melt away. "I came to challenge you," he admitted, "but your humility has challenged me instead." The young man stood and placed a hand over his heart. "We all learn from one another." The man nodded slowly. "Then I shall learn from you and walk with you for a while." Two travelers now walked side by side, not master and follower, not teacher and student, but two seekers of wisdom, each humbling himself to Allah's guidance, and far ahead. The horizon promised more lessons still. They walked together for several days, sharing water, stories, and silent reflection. One evening, as twilight brushed the sky with violet and gold, they reached a small oasis village. There they found a young boy sitting alone, crying softly. The stern man, the traveler who now walked with humility, asked gently, "What troubles you, little one?" The boy wiped his eyes and pointed to a collapsed clay wall near a house. "That was my father's garden wall. I was playing near it, and it fell. My father will be angry. I did wrong." The stern man turned to the young man, silently asking for guidance. The young man knelt beside the boy. "Did you mean to cause harm?" The boy shook his head rapidly. "No, I was only tossing pebbles. I didn't know the wall was weak." The young man smiled softly. "Then what fell was not the wall, but a misunderstanding." The next morning, when the father returned and saw the damage, he looked furious. But before he could speak harshly, the young man stepped in. "This was an accident," he said respectfully. "And if you allow us, we will help rebuild it." The stern man immediately nodded. "Yes, with our hands." The father hesitated, then sighed deeply. "If you help repair it, I will forget my anger." So the three of them worked, the boy carrying small stones, the stern man lifting the heavy ones, the young man mixing clay and water. Villagers watched as they rebuilt the wall together, not as punishment, but as cooperation. When they were finished, the father placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "Mistakes happen," he said, "but effort to fix them is what matters." The boys smiled with relief. Later, as they sat under the palms, the stern man said, "Today I learned something new. Truth can defend. Forgiveness can heal. But effort can restore." The young man nodded. "And every mistake is a chance to build something stronger than before." Night fell peacefully over the oasis, and the stars began to rise. The next morning, the young man awoke to the sound of birds and soft wind rustling the palm fronds. The oasis felt alive in a way the desert outside never had. The stern man stirred beside him and spoke first. "We have learned much here, but the path ahead will test more than patience or effort. It will test your heart itself." The young man nodded, closing the leather-bound book. "I am ready, inshallah. Each lesson has prepared me for the next." As they prepared to leave, the boy ran up, clutching a small bundle of dates. "Take this," he said shyly, "for the journey. May it keep you strong." The young man accepted the gift with a smile, tucking it into his satchel. "And may Allah keep you strong too," he replied, bowing slightly. They departed the village, moving east where the sand dunes rose higher, and the wind carried whispers of hidden valleys. The journey became harder, sun blazing by day, cold biting by night, but each step brought reflection. The young man often paused to open the book, finding new notes tucked between the pages. Courage without wisdom falters. Wisdom without courage hesitates. On the fourth day, they reached a ridge overlooking a canyon. Across the chasm, jagged rocks jutted out, and the wind howled through narrow crevices. The stern man stopped, gazing across the vastness. "We must cross there," he said. "But it is perilous." The young man studied the path. "And what will guide us safely?" "Trust," the stern man replied. "Trust in your heart, trust in your companion, and trust in Allah. Hesitation will cost more than boldness." The young man inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the lesson. Every journey carried risk, but the measure of a person was how they approached it, with fear mastered, not denied. With purpose held firm, not shaken. Step by step, they descended into the canyon, helping each other across unstable stones, testing each foothold carefully. The wind whipped against them, the stones shifting under their weight, yet they moved forward steadily, silently, with shared resolve. At the far edge, they paused, looking back at the canyon they had crossed. The young man smiled faintly. "Every challenge teaches more than ease ever could." The stern man nodded. "And every companion teaches more than solitude ever could."